MMA is a ruthless sport in which knockouts come in all forms, but the most brutal ones are the Ragdoll knockouts, which would even put horror movies to shame. So let's take a look at some of the most insane ones. Ilia Topuria versus Jay Herbert. Ilia Topuria is a maniac who has conquered enemy territory time and time again in his career. In 2022, when Topuria faced Jay Herbert in a lightweight fight at UFC London, he silenced the Parisian crowd with a terrifying knockout. Topuria had to face a lot of adversity in the first round as he was put on his butt with a head kick, but he managed to survive thanks to a takedown. In the second round, El Matador was far more calculated, and he walked his opponent down until he had him up against the cage. Once in a dominant position, Topuria let his hands go and launched a thunderous overhand right. Herbert's soul left his body in an instant. Rashad Evans versus Iolo Toa. When Rashad Evans put his light heavyweight title on the line against Iolo Toa at UFC 98, he was up against a challenge he hadn't seen before, and all of it proved to be too hot to handle for him on fight night. The two legends spent the majority of the first round in trying to figure out the best form of attack. Macha was the aggressor, while Evans stayed on the back foot and waited for his opponent to make a mistake. In the final minute of the first round, Macha sent Evans to the floor with a crushing body kick, followed by a sharp left hand, but the champ managed to survive. The action got more exciting in the second round, and both fighters had their moments, with Macha having the better ones until he had the best one in the fourth minute when he hurt Evans with a left hand and proceeded to unleash a barrage of punches as the American desperately tried to survive. As Evans stood against the cage to try and clear the cobwebs, Macha landed the most impactful blows of the night. A right hook followed by a left, and Evans folded like a lawn chair. The champ's face was a scary mess. Rashad Evans versus Chuck Liddell. Well, since you guys have seen Rashad Evans being the nail, here's him being the hammer against the man with the most powerful fist in the old school light heavyweight days, Chuck the Iceman Liddell. The first round of their fight at UFC 82 was an all-out striking battle, with Evans using his footwork to evade Liddell's powerful strikes. Little damage was done from both sides, but Liddell still managed to land the better shots that appeared to have Evans off balance. The second round was much like the first early on, although Evans was more willing to fight fire with fire and traded shots with the Iceman in the pocket whenever he was pressed against the cage. With the passage of time, Liddell grew more aggressive and started swinging with little regard for defense, and he ultimately paid the price for it. Less than 2 minutes into the second round, Evans landed a crushing overhand right, and Liddell crashed face first to the canvas. Michael Chandler versus Tony Ferguson. Michael Chandler didn't lie when he said he signed with the UFC to have some fun, and by that he meant highlight reel moments, such as his knockout victory against Tony Ferguson at UFC 274. Both Chandler and Ferguson were coming off losses when they locked horns at UFC 274, and surprisingly, Ferguson had a great first round where he dropped Chandler early but failed to finish him. Chandler then secured a takedown but was cut as Ferguson fired off sharp elbows off of his back. 10 seconds into the second round, however, the unthinkable happened. Chandler put the pressure on Ferguson and then launched a front kick to the face that sent Ferguson packing. Yuri Proska versus Dominic Reyes. Yuri Proska is one of the most exciting fighters on the UFC roster thanks to his unorthodox fighting style, which he put on display against Dominic Reyes at UFC Fight Night in May 2021. The fight was thrilling and, well, just kind of flat out odd, as both men traded some really big shots. Reyes was more orthodox in his approach, whereas Proska simply landed his strikes from wherever possible. Both were bruised and hurt, and at one point Reyes had his foe knocked out momentarily with an up kick, but the referee missed it. Eventually, any success that Reyes was having on the feet came to a halt when Proska pressed him against the cage and upped the ante, throwing punches and spinning attacks without mercy. Ultimately, Proska connected with a violent spinning back elbow, and Reyes fell to the canvas with his neck awkwardly bent. Quinton Jackson versus Vanderlay Silva. When Quinton Rampage Jackson and Vanderlay Silva fought at UFC 92, the Brazilian was 2-0 up and had dismantled the American with his superior striking. At UFC 92, Jackson came prepared, however. When the action began, both fighters showed a great deal of respect to each other's brutal knockout power. The feeling out process was lengthy, with Silva throwing some leg kicks and Jackson circling away from his opponent's power. As minutes went by, Silva's frustration grew, and in an attempt to finish his foe in a hurry, he came forward with a barrage of trademark looping hooks. Jackson ducked under the punches before unleashing a left hook that rendered the Brazilian unconscious. Yair Rodriguez versus the Korean Zombie. No MMA knockout reel is complete without Yair Rodriguez and the Korean Zombie. It was a fight and a finish that looks better every time you watch it. Interestingly, Rodriguez wasn't supposed to fight the Korean Zombie in 2018. Frankie Edgar was, but he was injured and came in the Mexican fighter to produce a Fight of the Year and Knockout of the Year contender. Right off the bat, the two featherweights traded huge shots to test each other's chins. Being the better puncher, the Korean Zombie had the better of the boxing exchanges, but Yair was firing back with venom as well. Chan Sung Young landed the better shots overall and was well on course to a rather comfortable victory when the two decided to have a final go at each other with 10 seconds remaining in the fight. The Korean Zombie blitzed forward with straight punches. Yair backpedaled, ducked under a punch, and came up with a reverse elbow that separated TKZ from his consciousness. Jamal Hill versus Johnny Walker. Reigning UFC light heavyweight champion Jamal Hill had championship caliber from the day he signed with the UFC. And when he dispatched Johnny Walker in the first round in 2022 started, Walker wasted no time using his long frame to land kicks and straight punches from a distance. Hill had a tough time managing distance, but was Francis Ngannou versus Stipe Miocic. Having already defeated Francis Ngannou at UFC 220, Stipe Miocic was expected to do it all over again in their rematch at UFC 260. The second fight took place 4 years after the first one, and Ngannou had grown leaps and bounds by then, especially after joining Extreme Couture MMA. Miocic had the edge in wrestling on paper, but as soon as the fight started, fans were surprised to see the Cameroonians improve grappling. To counter Ngannou's threat on the feet, Miocic decided to go for a takedown, but Ngannou sprawled and took his foes back, unleashing huge shots from behind, forcing Miocic into disengaging and finding space. In the second round, Ngannou's dominance on the feet continued. Half a minute into the second round, Ngannou rocked Miocic with a sharp straight left hand. Miocic survived the initial onslaught and fired back to rock Ngannou, but the Predator quickly finished the job with another straight left as Miocic fell backward awkwardly. Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal. Jorge Masvidal is the owner of one of the sturdiest chins in MMA history, and only 2 men have been able to crack it, one of them being Kamaru Usman. When the two welterweights competed in their title rematch at UFC 261, things escalated quickly. The first round was fairly competitive as both landed strikes. Usman had the upper hand because of his wrestling, and he secured a couple of takedowns, although Masvidal would pop right back up each time. The second round was expected to be much of the same, with Usman using his wrestling to stay ahead on points. But instead of point fighting, Usman decided to stand and trade with Street Jesus and knocked him out with a hellacious straight right only a minute into the second round. Masvidal's system immediately shut down. And that is all for today. If you enjoyed the video, please show us some love by smashing that subscribe button and turning on those notifications. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.